Good morning. Today, I will talk about knowledge dissemination and popularization strategies in financial news. I will start by introducing some financial background and the paper's objectives. Then I will focus on the methodology and the corpus gathered and investigated. I will then focus on some aspects of the analysis carried out, and I will briefly conclude. Narratives have always been relevant to economic fluctuations, rationalizing current actions such as spending and investing, inspiring and linking activities to important values and needs. They affect people's emotions and actions. Today's information technology and social media have enhanced the power of news media and of knowledge dissemination. The present study has analyzed and compared a corpus of articles from the Financial Times and one from the Times in the years from 2008 to 2020, selected around the keyword bail-in. The bail-in is a tool introduced by a EU directive to move the burden of bank losses from taxpayers to shareholders, unsecured and uninsured creditors. This is very important for, let's say, people's rights. The choice of these new papers was due to the fact that the Financial Times has specialized while and therefore addresses expert readers, while the Times targets the layman. And the main research question was, do these articles differ in terms of how they deal with specialized topics according to their target audience? In particular, this paper has been tackling the concepts of popularization and knowledge dissemination, focusing on the one hand on how financial discourse is intertwined with non-verbal elements and the news discourse in both corpora, and on the other hand on how the outcome is perceived and understood by the non-expert reader within the framework of financial discourse, discourse analysis, and corpus analysis. Therefore, the two corpora have been compared on the basis of their textual form, organization, sentence subjects, grammatical voices, verb choices, modality, hedging, rhetorical structures, as well as metaphors, narratives, expressive functions, and so on. However, for today's presentation, I will only concentrate on some of them. Let's start by introducing the corpus. As we can see from a first look at the table, there is a higher number of words in the Financial Times corpus. This is due to the specialization of the term bail-in and of the newspaper. Bail-in is likely to be more frequent and the object of a higher number of articles in the Financial Times, much higher. In fact, we talk about 734 articles in the Financial Times, 111 articles in the Times. The density of the language used is similar. The standardized type token ratio for 1,000 words is very similar, slightly higher in the Times, probably due to the fact that it addresses a non-expert reader and needs to explain difficult financial issues more deeply. However, we will see effectively how things go. Both the corpora were downloaded from the database LexisNexis, now Lexis Unit, and from the official websites both of the Financial Times .com and the Times.co.uk. The choice of these different sources is due to the fact, was due to the fact that LexisNexis and LexiUni are user friendly. We find the text they are suitable for a quantitative verbal analysis and they are user friendly, while the original articles have rather different layouts. Thus, their multimodal investigation may detect various purposes and results and result in diverse outcomes. Here we have a better outlook at years from 2008 to 2020 and the number of articles for each year. As the bail-in was introduced in 2014 with the Bank Recovery and Resolution Directive, people, let's say that this topic becomes more important. Of course, it was definitely used in 2014, but introduced slightly earlier. Let's look at the word bail-in from a quantitative point of view. In the Financial Times and in the Times, you can compare numbers. What we need to look at, apart from the total number, I think it's better to look at percentages. Okay. Therefore, the most frequent expression is bail, but also it normally comes with in, most of the times with an hyphen. Okay. But we find also other forms. The most interesting one is bailinable or even unbailinable or non-bailinable. So all it is of course a coined expression, and all forms of it have been used in the newspapers. Here also we have some clusters. In fact, we normally find a bail-in with the highest frequency, and we find it more frequently as an adjective. Bail-in rules, bail-in bonds, bail-in regime, debt, and so on. But we also find it as a noun in the plural, bail-ins, and we also find it as a verb, to bail in, as we can see from the table. Here we have some examples from the text. Bail-in, the act of forcing losses on senior unsecured creditors to avoid a taxpayer-funded bank bailouts of failing banks, should be treated in a similar way to bankruptcy proceedings. So also the comparison with a bailout. Again from the Times. So here we have a definition of bail-in. We will come back on this. Grandfathering could lead to a wave of issuance as banks rushed to issue non-bail-inable debt before the cutoff point. Very specialized language, even if it is in the Times. One fascinating idea that politicians would do well to look at is a set of so-called bail-in ideas that have emerged from Credit Suisse. This concept, which was laid out and a further description is given. So here we also have the use of so-called, and we will also come back on this. The corpus has been analyzed from three main perspectives: their textual, formal, and functional aspects, their social, institutional, and professional background, and the social context that they are embedded in. I have decided not to include in this discussion the analysis carried out on the textual organization of all articles, both in the database, where, of course, we had a very simple, user friendly layout, and in the corpus gathered from the original newspapers, which also considers how the text and images help each other in obtaining the same result. Of course, in terms of discourse, from a linguistic point of view, text and image have been considering as fulfilling three functions: that of informing, narrating, and persuading, which characterize news discourse on the one hand, and on the other hand, those of informing, evaluating, and predicting, typical of financial discourse. In particular, comparing specialized texts and popularizations, the purpose changes. So the purpose of these texts is to inform. Popularizations address a wide reading public and deal with specialized topics in a language which is closer to the general discourse and to the layman's everyday experiences. Therefore, we expect less specialized terminology, which is present occasionally and not systematically, less technical explanations of financial processes and phenomena, and the lack of the reduction of scientific discussion. General language means that the expressions have cultural and linguistic features that are as close as possible to general language. For time reasons, today we are going basically to focus on some results on thematization, terminology, and metalingual expressions used to adapt, recontextualize, remediate texts. In fact, by recontextualization, we mean that the original discourse produced in a specific context does not only need to be reformulated, but also to be adapted to the communicative features and restraints of the new context of the media and addressee. It is the journalist who has the task to re-elaborate, reformulate, and adapt the text at all linguistic levels in terms of structure, function, and shared knowledge. Okay, so it is a process of remediation led by the journalist. Attempts. Okay, first of all, we talked about recontextualization from specialized texts to popularization. So one of the most frequent tools, linguistic tools used is juxtaposition, which means, for example, paraphrasing a specialized term to explain it. And we find the separation through a comma, dash, dashes, parentheses, or disjunctive conjunctions. We found some of these strategies, and we'll also went to look at expressions such as mean, or means or meant, known, cold, so cold, as, like, a little of, or a sort of. So all those expressions, let's say, metalinguistic expressions are used or signaling an authorial comment of the periphrasis in order to reduce the semantic approximation. We know that a specialized language is characterized by monoreferentiality, so using a synonym or semantic approximation most of the times is all we can find. Okay, so here are some of the expressions used that has several functions, as we will see, not only introducing the expression that is to better explain. So that is very frequent, 6,112 instances in the Financial Times. Fewer, but still 1.53%, so even more, which we would expect in the Times. Mean or means or meant. We have 0.01, 0.03, 0.01 in the Financial Times. We have slightly higher percentages in the Times. Known as, one of the typical expressions, as we will see, a slightly higher percentage in the Times. Called and so-called, more or less, the percentage is the same. As, of course, has several meanings, so we have to look into context, like a little. I didn't find any instances of sort, a sort of, in the Financial Times, couples in the Times. Here we have the expression means, mean, or meaning, or meant, together with in context, so mean that, which is typical when we want to give explanation of something, and this is the Times, meaning that, and so on. Here we have clusters, means that are meant to what it means. This means that. And some examples from the Financial Times: bail-in bonds, also known as, or in a process known as. This is for the Times, known as that, known as bail, known as COCOs, a type of bails, bail-ins, a bail-in, known as, again, that, known as, and the frequency. Some more examples from the Financial Times: the use of that. It was always hoped that unleveraged cash-rich investors such as Warren Buffett or a sovereign wealth fund would make such an offer to the banks. So 3 cheers that the bank is thinking more radically about helping the sector. There are many instances of metaphors throughout both corpora, but we won't have time to look at them. The evidence is that, the reality is that, highlighting what comes afterwards. Many thematic deviation devices are used, cleft sentences, many impersonal expressions, more explanations. There are bones of that. Bail-in may be that mechanism, that a lot of uses of that with anaphoric reference. That is the way to deal with it, introducing further explanation. In the Times means that it would have been hard. It is inevitable that. That is a big deal, mean that, namely that. So these are some of the instances we have been looking at. Of course, it is a much broader research. Normally, we start from looking at specialized language, but as you can see from these tables, the language in the two corpora has instances of certain words which have the same importance. So even if we expect some differences in popularizations in the time, at the end, the most important items are the same in terms of lexical items, banks, in terms of modal verbs, in terms of new expressions, losses, and all specialized language. So a first analysis of these corpora actually didn't give me the results I expected. And a first explanation of that could be that financial discourses at the end are very difficult and probably can't be simplified as one would expect. At the same time, I thought that in the Times I would have found more expressions introducing definitions or introducing better explanations of a term. I wouldn't say a glossary, but more, let's say, explanations with a more general language. Of course, this also may depend on the type of approach the newspaper has, but also the lens used by the journalist and their choices. This is only a part of the study, also a pilot study around the term bail-in and bail-out. Probably I will have to broaden the data. And also, a real conclusion can be drawn after all elements, speech acts, text functions, metaphors, and so on, have been looked at.